Draft philosophy comes down to this: don't make big mistakes. What can the Chiefs do to avoid it today? On Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
The Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every single day on every platform, everywhere, starting here on YouTube, where I would ask you to like this video, to sub to the channel, and hit that bell so you get notifications. Then head out to Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts on audio. You can get us free 5 days a week plus them. The locals already know that. Here on the Insider text line, as well as our everyday listeners, we appreciate you guys. That line is 816-357-8781. We're brought to you by Gametime. Right now, download that app, create your account, and use our code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $20 off your first ticket purchase at Gametime. Gametime's not what we're talking about today. We are talking about prep for Gametime, which is coming in about 6 months. It's about taking all the information we have about the NFL draft and how they can improve this roster to try to go back for a three-peat without making the big missteps. We're going to tell you about what their opponents in the AFC are coming down to and what that stacks up. The seas are changing out there in the AFC. We're going to talk about avoiding the big reach. How do you do that? There are some tried and true ways to make sure that you guard yourself against that. And we're going to start right now about how you go about this. 32 is a tough spot to be in. And it comes down to, you always have guys that you like. This team in particular has had a tendency to identify targets rather than tiers. And when you're picking at 32, like they did last year, that's got to change. You have to go towards tiers, clusters, if you want to call them, of targets that are similar or at least graded out similarly. Doesn't mean they're the same position. Doesn't mean that they're the same even side of the ball. But that's what I think, that's how you make sure that you future-proof yourself without getting too caught up in one single target.
I can see that. I think that it's interesting. I think it's really going to be hard for Kansas City continuously drafting in the 30s to continuously go out and get guys that are going to fit the positions that they're going to want to get them at. I do think that they put a premium on getting premium positions in their first round pick. And that, if you look at the past couple of seasons, that's what they've done. And I think that that's kind of where they've maybe gone wrong a little bit in the past with some of those picks, is they've tried to stay at the premium positions. And that becomes very hard considering they're usually picked over by the 30th pick.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and this one's tough because we know about the depth. We've heard about it, and I certainly see it when I'm doing all the film grades that we're doing over at Rogue APC. You guys can get connected there. If I didn't say it before, this is Chris Clark. He runs Chiefs Corner, where you need to get all the information about the quarterbacks and the cap and the finances and everything that is how the league runs. Check that out at Chiefs Corner. I'm Ryan Tracy. I run Rogue Analytics, where we do the athletic matrix and the draft guide, and we combine film, production metrics, and the all-important athleticism to get that all on a 360 view of prospects. And as I get through it, I'm starting to build the draft guide, which you can get a discount on by using the code LOC. It's becoming very clear that it's top heavy in a couple of positions, ones that the Chiefs need in wide receiver and tackle, offensive tackle in particular, but it's not necessarily enough to get down to 32. So I think they have to widen the tier there that they have options for, so that they don't get shoehorned. It might have to be a corner. It might have to be a defensive tackle, because if you have one of those graded above where every wide receiver and offensive tackle is when they get to your pick, that's the safest way to make sure that you're fulfilling some kind of need without sacrificing taking a chance on somebody who might not pan out.
Yeah, and I think that they have to look at everything. I mean, it's going to be hard. And this is where I think that if you don't need a premium position, if you don't need an offensive tackle, a wide receiver, which I do think is a premium position now, and I would almost argue corner probably isn't. If you don't need a defensive end, you don't need a quarterback, you don't need those types of things, trading is probably going to be your best friend. You're going to try to trade up, or you're going to try to trade back, because you want to be trading to where you think you're going to get the most value. And that's going to be very hard to do at 30 or 32. And I know they're 32 this year, but I'm talking mainly in the future, because I do think that they're going to be late 20s, early 30s or well, obviously early 30s for the next several seasons. I think they're going to be Super Bowl contenders and playing in the AFC Championship games, and this is just where they're going to be picking every year.
Yeah, I mean, 26 or higher is what I foresee too. So preparing for that is the hard part, and it's interesting that you.
Sorry, I just was going to say this draft seems to be so deep that everybody seems to be putting a premium on it, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the third segment. But I do think it plays into how this draft is also going to play out.
Yeah, I think in general, and I break things up a little bit more probably methodically than a lot of media analysts do when it comes to draft tiers. I think the teams are very specific. For me, there's two tiers of offensive tackles in this group that are first round worthy. It's not just that if you're a first rounder, you're tier one, right? There's definitely a separation in there as well. But then tiers 2 and 3 take a big hit real fast. Whereas the top two tiers for wide receiver are probably going 8 deep, and they might all go before 20. So you have a chance at 32 to have a better option there, but it also goes beyond that. It goes down to the trade down value. If you're going into the late 30s or the early 40s, you're still going to have options at that particular position group. The question is going to be, are they the best graded prospect on your board that you think fits you? And that's what I think they have to make sure to keep a wider view and not get tunnel vision.
And we'll see what they end up doing. I still think they're going to stick with their philosophy. And since Veach has been in charge over the past several years, it seems like they're going premium positions in the first. Maybe they switch that up this year. Maybe they're able to get a trade up and go get a guy they want, or maybe they're going to trade back and be able to take somebody more in the 30s and add a couple more draft picks, which in a lot of ways, the deeper this draft goes, which it seems like it's going to be an extremely deep draft this year, it may actually work in the Chiefs' favor to trade back, because if you can get an extra pick this year, even if you end up getting another pick next year that you can maybe use later in the draft to trade up in another round to go get somebody else, that plays into your pocket. If there's not somebody there that you feel like is the value of that pick, and you're never going to be picking a first round talent at 30 in the 30s or at 25 even. So the reality is, if you have those guys low second round, maybe you try to trade back and see if you can accumulate, another third round pick or another fourth round pick, because those picks, there's still a lot of depth at different positions in this draft. It's a very deep draft across the board. It's not just top heavy in the first round.
Yeah, and it plays into a lot of their needs in terms of where the value is in this draft. One thing you can't do is get out on a limb and go for a reach. How do they avoid that, and what would it look like? Coming up next on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost of every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with the 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as if Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. The 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood Gold IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer.
Now, you can get everything that you need 24/7. If you're watching us right now, you might be watching a replay on Locked On Sports Today. If you're already subbed there, if you're not, you can see 24/7 coverage of all the major sports stories, shows, teams like ours. Get it there at Locked On Sports Today, either on YouTube where it's free and available or on Amazon Fire TV. Check that out. The reach is something that we don't like to talk about because it has a tendency to raise its head. And it looks like currently to me that I don't know that we're going to have to see another scenario where you felt like you pushed the McCole Hardman selection. Rashee Rice drama seems to be settling down a little bit. He's in cooperation with the Dallas authorities, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that part's been alleviated. But there's been other reaches by this administration in Kansas City in the past. And I think lessons are learned, but there's always that situation that puts you into a bind that we can likely see from here. At 32, it's more than likely that you don't have a first-round grade left on anybody on the board. And so then how do you avoid getting to the reach? I think there's a significant thing about teams not wanting to allow the Chiefs to trade up in order to make themselves stronger. That does make sense to me. I can see teams being competitive that way. I don't feel that there's as much resistance to the Chiefs trading back. And so they might have to trade back farther than they want. But I do think that the number one strategy in not forcing yourself into a reach is getting out of 32. Much like we talked about L'Jarius Sneed and the options that he had, the worst thing that he could have done is played on the tag on this season, right? The worst thing the Chiefs can do is stay at 32 and pick somebody. I think Chris is dumbfounded. I can't hear anything he's thinking.
And I have no idea why my mic was muted. So my apologies. It's just, this is hard. And it's going to be hard. And I keep saying it every year. It's going to be hard because you're in a situation where one of the reasons that it's picking in the first round is so valuable is because you get a fifth-year option. And in some ways, picking at the end of the first round gives you an even better option because that option isn't really going to hamstring you if you want to pick it up on a player because it's not going to be as high as somebody picked in the top 10. So, those picks can be extremely valuable. And I think that's one of the reasons Kansas City has stayed at those premium positions is because they're drafting guys that they're looking at and saying, okay, if we get to a position where we feel like we want to keep them and we want their fifth-year option, we'll be okay picking up a fifth-year option on a guy like Trent McDuffie. We'll be okay picking up a fifth-year option on George Karlaftis. Those are the types of guys and those are the positions specifically. And Trent McDuffie's a little different. I did say earlier, I think CB is probably not the premium position it once was, but they absolutely wanted Trent McDuffie. So they went up and got him. And I think that they're going to be fine. And I do think he'll be in Kansas City a long time, and they'll put in that fifth-year option probably after. I mean, that's got to be getting determined here pretty shortly. So we'll see how that gets determined. But I do think that plays into an advantage if they want to trade back because some teams are going to want to go and get a player and know that they have the ability to keep them there on a fifth-year option at a cheaper rate than probably they could sign him as a free agent after that fourth year.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major selling points to anybody that Brett Veach picks up the phone with that's picking in the 30s at the top of the second round is, hey, you can lock this guy down for another year of control if you want to. Whoever you have next on your needs list, you can go get that done. That, and I do think that despite probably what's going to be a pretty good flurry of quarterback selections at the top 10 of the draft, I do think there's volume here. I personally have the West Coast quarterbacks going in the first round. I easily see Bo Nix and Michael Penix getting selected. But there are other quarterbacks teams might have higher. It's going to be very, very interesting to see if there's 4 in the top 10 or just 3 or who comes in next. But especially the Patriots, top of the second round. I don't think the Cardinals are going to go for that, but you never know. They might want to get some insurance for Kyler Murray. It's been a long road for him. There are a couple of other teams that could maybe see an opportunity at the top half that they just don't know they can get. So why not jump up into 32 to try to grab that guy? I think those are the two main selling points for Brett Veach.
Well, and that's huge if you get a quarterback on a fifth-year contract because with the exploding quarterback market, if you hit on your guy, that is a cheap cap number for the year. So, I mean, and generally speaking, most of the way that these contracts have been done is that that fifth-year option is cooked into the contract extension and it's part of it. So I do think that that's a huge value. If you can find a guy that's going to be there at 32 that you feel like is your quarterback of the future, maybe you can get somebody to trade up for you and go get him. That'd be great for Kansas City because you look at the positions and you're right. I think that offensive tackles are going to be picked over well before 32 and wide receiver could be picked over as well. I mean, this is a deep draft, but those are our 2 premium positions right now. And you start looking at some of the teams that are going to need wideouts, especially we're going to talk about here in just a minute. There's going to be a run on wideouts in this draft in the first round.
There definitely is. The question is, How many is that volume? Where do the tackles fill in there too? There could be as many as 7 tackles taken this first round as well. And that all puts the Chiefs at a bigger premium, I think, at that position, looking at a second-tier prospect, or third-tier prospect at this point. They are definitely going to have to push for that, but they're not the only ones pushing. The whole AFC is pushing. The AFC West in particular has a lot of ground to make up. A couple of teams are making some noise. What does the AFC look like, and how do the Chiefs combat it? That's coming up next on the Locked On Podcast Network. I love picking specific matchups, and everybody has those that they want to go attend in person and live it and see that game unfold. Sometimes you don't know that you're doing it until you do it. Last minute tickets, they are important. There's one place that you can get everything that you need, not just last minute tickets, but flash deals in specific areas of venues that really go over big. It's easy right now as everybody's getting into Major League Baseball. It's that time of the year, right? Start thinking about where you're going to be sitting. You can see everything, and every seat has a view in Gametime. Gametime is the app that you want to go check it out, and you can get last-minute deals up to 60% off on sports, concerts, comedy shows, theater productions, everything that you're looking for. That's the best way to go, and it's guaranteed lowest price, or they're going to give you 110% back. That's the way that it goes. All you got to do is take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Go to the Gametime app, create your account, and use our code LOCKEDONNFL. That's going to get you $20 off of your first purchase, no matter what that ticket price is. So terms do apply. But again, you just go get the app, Gametime, create an account, and spell out LOCKEDONNFL. That's Locked On NFL for $20 off of that first purchase. You can download it today, right now. It's last minute tickets, it's lowest prices, and it is absolutely guaranteed. One other thing that is guaranteed is that you have to have patience, drive, and the passion to get yourself a winning formula for championships as much as you do to take care of your ride. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle up to the level that you're looking for and keep it at peak performance, whether that's superchargers, roof racks, lift kits that I'm looking for my newest vehicle, exhaust kits, the whole 9 yards. Whether you're trying to go fast, whether you want speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, that part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, every single time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need and the prices that you want, you can take care of your MVP and bring it home with a win. Right now, keep it riding nice and smooth at eBay Motors. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. An eBay guaranteed fit is only for U.S. customers. Make sure that you check out the draft guide, the athletic matrix, everything at rogueapc.com. That's ROGUEAPC.com. Get over to Chiefs Corner at KCChiefsCorner.com. That'll take you to the Substack. NFL 33 and RGR Football are other places you can get more content from. Doing this going on, 9 years at this point. And so it kind of gets into the point where it comes in cycles. We've talked about draft strategy, but the cycle's coming around again in that the Chiefs have done a very good job the last 5 years of staying right there at the top, staying focused, staying within striking distance. Very much a different way about going about what I think Marty started his formula with back in the 90s, right? Stay there so that you can jump, right? Other teams are falling apart. We've seen a lot of changes. The Bengals have had to make a ton of changes. Now the Bills have as well. The two most formidable AFC challengers of the last couple of years are going through a lot of changes. And I want to ask you, just before we even get into the details, are they still the most formidable challengers?
I don't think so. I think that you look at the Buffalo Bills, and I think that they've dropped. I don't even know that they're – because of Josh Allen, they may be top 5 in the AFC. But they're not at the top of the top 5 anymore. And I would have put them easily in the top 3 before, but they've just had so many guys that they've lost this year. And, we were talking about it before the show started. What is it? 56 million in dead cap space this year. And 31.1 of that is Stephon Diggs. And, you look at that situation in Buffalo, that was one of the worst long-term extensions that could have ever been made. And they're going to take it all on the chin this year. They're going to get rid of all the dead cap and all that this year, and so be it. So, it's good for the organization to get rid of a player I guess they didn't want anymore because obviously they gave him away.
I mean, if you feel bad about this Snead trade, this ought to make you smile ear to ear, right?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, the issue though is like Diggs already had a contract, so and it's already in my mind it's probably over what his market really is, what his value really is.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I guess I get it to an extent, but the Texans aren't having to really. I mean, they have to put out some money this year, but they don't really have anything guaranteed next year. They think there's like $4 million guaranteed. So quite literally, they could have gotten Stephon Diggs for a second round pick, basically, for next year, and spend whatever they're spending this year on his contract plus another $3 or $4 million next year. And if he doesn't work out, they still have a young team. But you can do this because you have a guy like, they have their young QB in Stroud right now. So I think that matters. And then you look at the Bengals. But sorry, before I hit the Bengals, the Bills lost Mitch Morse. They lost, their safeties. Just their entire roster was gutted at different positions. And I don't know how they come back from that this year. I'm not saying they can't come back from it, period. I just don't know how they come back from it this year. I don't think that they had the talent that was young that was going to be able to take over those positions. And then you look at the Bengals and, they're bringing in the number 2 rated tackle in the draft this year for a top 30 visit. I thought they had their left tackle.
Yeah, well, we all know how that goes with that particular player.
Interestingly enough, Kansas City, I think, allowed 24 sacks in 2023. You want to take a guess at how many the Bengals allowed?
I'm going to say 24.
50.
Wow. I did not know that either. That's I feel much better now that you say that. Thank you very much.
So, I mean, you look at it and you think, okay, 24 sacks is stack and a half a game, roughly. So that's not horrible. But, they're allowing 3-4 sacks a game. So, I mean, you look at that in total and you look at what they're going to have to do. I mean, they have T. Higgins this year, but they've made, from everything I've read, they've made no progress on a deal. They're not trying to sign him to a long-term deal. They're literally going to play him on the franchise tag. He's pissed about it. He wants to be traded. I don't think they're going to trade him, which makes sense from their franchise standpoint. But, you still have to pay Jamar Chase. And you're going to be paying him $30 million a year probably, I would imagine. And then you can have $30 million in Jamar Chase and $55 million in Joe Burrow. And how are you going to build a team around that?
It's going to be a challenge. And that's the shifting of the guard here. I'm glad you bring up the Texans because maybe you're right. And maybe Stephon Diggs, maybe the contract that he was on is not relative to what you're getting from him. But he's still a drastic upgrade in Houston, a team that already made a push. And that's what has me thinking that maybe it is a shifting, a changing of the guard from Kansas City's got teams on its heels, but it's the Dolphins and the Texans now, not the Bengals and the Bills.
Well, I think the Ravens are still there too. So, I question the Dolphins and whether or not they're going to have sustained success, mainly because they seem to do really well early in the season, and then they just don't seem to have the brand of football that can make it in the playoffs. And that's going to be very hard to have sustained success if you have that brand of football. So we'll see whether or not they're able to change things. And the big question when it comes to the Dolphins is always going to be Tua. Is his arm going to be enough when it matters? Because at some point you can have all the talent around him you want, but at some point he's going to have to make a play. And the question is can he make that play? And not only can you just make it once, but he's going to have to make it multiple times.
Well, that's always a challenge. His brother happens to be in this draft, and the Chiefs have to stay focused on their draft plans. We'd like to know what you think is the best philosophy. How do they accomplish these goals of making sure that they're on target for what fits this roster? They avoid the reach, and they actually stay out front and within striking distance of these other AFC teams. Leave your comments below here on YouTube. Like, sub, and hit that bell. Leave us some iTunes reviews, Apple podcast they call that now. You can get over there too, even on Spotify. We appreciate you guys being here. Now tomorrow, we're getting back to Freaky Friday. We're going to come up with some kind of strangeness that is going to be enjoyable. I certainly understand that, and we're going to try to top each other here. We are not precluding each other. So we'll bring some surprises to the table. Hope you guys will join us. Make sure that you're here for that. And thank you for being with us today. Enjoy the rest of this run-up as we get ready for Freaky Friday. And then it'll be Mock Draft Monday before you know it. So be prepared. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you, and we will talk to you tomorrow.